Hello and welcome back to another episode of the Bildad, the Shoe Height podcast. I am Jamie.
And I'm Mike.
This is true. And today we're going to look at the Wild at Heart book. We're keeping going through the topics, and the topic today is A Beauty to Rescue.
Indeed. So yeah, the second longing of the masculine soul. Obviously last time we covered A Battle to Fight, and the second desire or core longing of the masculine soul is a beauty to rescue. And obviously for those who have read the book, John Eldredge really focuses on, the archetypical beauty to rescue. So you kind of see, or he highlights, Arthur had Guinevere, and Aragorn had Arwen, Spider-Man had Mary Jane, and so on and so forth. In every kind of hero story there is a female protagonist. And even in our ancient mythological stories of like St. George, St. George slays the dragon and he gets the gold and the virgin and so on and so forth. So there's obviously something about that story which is obviously deeply wired in us. And then obviously there's our own longings for a wife and romantic partner as well.
This is true, yeah, there's that archetypal story, like Snow White, Cinderella, they all have that archetype in. Interestingly, in more modern times, if you take James Bond, who you could say he's quite an archetypal character in that he exemplifies quite a few general masculine traits. I think in the latest James Bond he gets a partner, and there's another agent who becomes his partner, and throughout the film she kind of becomes more and more prominent than James Bond. I think she becomes the next 007. So he doesn't quite get the girl in that episode, but she becomes his successor. So yes, the idea of
that's interesting.
Yes,
and it's funny you say that, because in more the modern Disney films as well, it's there's films like Frozen where the main character doesn't need the main female lead. She's a strong independent woman, she doesn't need a man. And I think there was obviously controversy not too long ago in regards to the remaking of Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs. I think the actress caused quite a storm because she was the strong independent female lead, and there wasn't going to be a prince in the film, which is an interesting take. And it's funny as well because in the audiobook version of Wild at Heart, John Eldredge has a Q&A session at the end of the book, and one of the questions is from a woman, and she balks against the beauty to rescue chapter and says, I'm squared away, I don't need rescuing. And okay, maybe, but you kind of profoundly miss the point, I think, if that's your response to a beauty to rescue is, oh yeah, I don't need rescuing, is to again kind of just misunderstand men. You quote unquote may not need rescuing, but men need to be needed. And that's the point. That's the point, really. Yeah. Okay. If you're a strong, independent woman, it's like, okay, what do you need a man for?
Okay.
It's like, well, then you're free to stay and become, your unmarried cat lady. But
okay.
Interject.
Okay. Yeah. So men. We can say that men need to be needed. And another thing you were saying that the book says is like women. They have an innate need to be pursued, to be desired, to be lovable. So that's something which is innate within women. So to deny something which is innate within you is to kind of lock up a part of yourself which would be bad.
Absolutely.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Eve's wound. Like one thing that reminds me of is in Genesis, part of the curse, part of the fall, the part of the fall for the man, like the fall from grace for the man is that work will become hard. He will only eat by the sweat of his brow. So before the fall, work was not hard, food was abundant, and after the fall, you only can eat if you sweat and labour. But then part of the fall for the women was that her desire will be for her husband, and yeah, that's quite an interesting thing, because it seems, yeah, would that be a negative thing, that part of the female desire is for the husband, if it's...
Well, is her desire to rule over her husband. I think it might be translated differently or in different translations. But kind of, when I read that, I kind of get like a sense of like there's like competitive almost strife in regards to, you know, ruling over one another. And I think whereas Paul's kind of antidote to that is, you know, submit yourselves one to another, you know, as unto the Lord. And then obviously he lays out that kind of, you know, in the marital relationship, the husband is in the role of Christ and the woman is in the role of the church as well. So, okay, you can see male headship in that, but to interpret that as competitive in some way, shape or form is to, I think, misunderstand what Paul is getting at. And again, equally to misunderstand the idea of a beauty to rescue. It's interesting because again, this obviously anecdotal, but I think many men might resonate with this, is they may be struggling in and of themselves, and certainly experientially it's been the case for myself as well. But then all of a sudden, if their wife or partner are struggling, something within you just comes alive, because you know you need to step up to you know to help them. So you are needed in that there and then. So something within you comes alive. So yeah, it's not a oh, I'm a poor me, I'm a damsel in distress and I need a man to come and rescue me. And you know, there are many cases where, you know, rescuing the damsel in distress. I think Jordan Peterson, in one of the extended, you know, rules, obviously he's got his 12 rules for life, but that was originally part of a great list, and one of the rules was on the, you know, is don't help someone who doesn't want to be helped. And then even if someone who does want to be helped, you need to make very well sure that you are able to do so. Otherwise, what will happen is you won't pull them out of the pit; they'll end up pulling you into the pit.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So all good stuff. So yeah, talking about men and women and how they interrelate. One thing you just reminded me of, we're just coming out of summer, and in August, wasps start behaving badly. Wasps start being annoying. So it would normally be around the time of August when the wasp would come over to you when you're having your picnic and start to insistently pick away at your cheese sandwiches. But apparently this is because in the second half of August, the queen has done all of her jobs. So she's got the hive, she has fed the larvae, she's laid all the eggs, they've hatched into larvae, she's looked after them, all of her jobs are done. And because her jobs are done, she stops putting out a certain pheromone. And this pheromone that she puts out, it excites the male worker wasps, and it makes them productive. So they're going about their tasks properly. They're hunting. They're tending the hive. They're doing what they should be doing. In other words, they're productive, because they're all pursuing the scent of the queen wasp. But then when the queen wasp stops putting out this scent, they're sort of like, they just go around like bachelors, they do whatever they want, they get drunk off of pears and apples, and they become annoying. So there's the sense in which the male wasps, even though they can be quite effective in what they're doing, without that direction and centering of the female influence, really they're just like kind of like yobs going around pillaging and causing havoc. But yeah, with that pheromone of the female, they kind of are looking after a family, and maybe that's what we're kind of getting towards with like a beauty to rescue. men need to be needed, and without that sort of positive focus of a female, maybe a lot of men can kind of get lost and destroy a lot of picnics.
Well, yeah, absolutely. Well, I mean, again, it's again, something like Jordan Peterson would say as you go through life, an antidote to suffering is taking on meaningful responsibility.
Yeah.
And obviously, getting married or pursuing a woman to get married to, that demands a lot of you. And there's obviously the risk of rejection during that, which is just a huge hurdle and barrier to overcome, which is why some people don't even obviously the idea of involuntary celibates now, because rejection is so terrifying, is that they just put that off. The problem is with that is obviously you delay that maturation phase, and you don't become fully who you are meant to be because you shelved part of yourself because you're scared of rejection. So
rejection's interesting because in 2024 it's possible to get a lot of what we want fairly instantly. Like you go online, you order something off of Amazon, and it turns up straight away. One trend at the moment is this website Temu, where the phrase for that is like to shop like a billionaire. It's like this idea that you can get whatever you want for, in a really quick, slick experience. You're never going to get really rejected off of Amazon. You're never going to get, the sense of, there's not a lot of need for like delayed gratification. You can just get what you want straight away. No rejection. Whereas to pursue a girl and to win her and to kind of, I don't know, create a real relationship and true love, there's a risk of rejection, but also it's going to be a slow process. You can't just click and order a real relationship.
Yeah. I mean, it takes time to obviously build trust and open yourself up, and obviously there's huge vulnerability in that, and that demands a lot of you, especially as you might get rejected, and it's a strong possibility that you might. But nevertheless, that doesn't mean just because the fear of rejection or being rejected is obviously awful. Just because it's awful, it doesn't mean that it's not something that you have to face anyway.
Yeah. So we need the courage as men to kind of face these kinds of things. And I would say one place we could find that courage is actually in God, because God has a lot of interesting things to say about relationships. So in general there would be an idea out there that you need to find your other half or find your better half. So there's this idea that single people, they're somehow less than a whole person because they need to find their other half to be completed. But the Bible actually has a very high view of singleness, and Jesus himself was single, and there's the idea that it's actually God who we're looking for that sense of completion. Like God is the one who kind of mends that hole, fulfills that hole in our hearts. And the Bible even goes as far as to say that singleness is a better path than marriage. Not that it's a path that I mainly aspire to myself, but it says that singleness is a better path. But if you marry, you still kind of do a good thing. So the idea within Christian dating is, become a whole person to start with, come to know God to start with, be fulfilled and satisfied in God to start with, and then from that place of kind of strength and security, go and find someone else who has the same relationship with God as you do. So like, don't look to be completed in finding the other person, but rather offer your strength of having been completed to the other person as as a way of serving.
Yeah, and you summed that up brilliantly, and that's one of the points that John Eldredge makes towards the end is like, you're not going to the woman to get your needs met. You're not kind of using her for her, drinking her beauty to,
what she can give you.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Is you're going there to offer your strength, because as a man you have a strength to offer. And it is again seemingly paradoxical in the Christian faith, is because you need to hold both things in tandem, don't you? It's kind of, okay, yeah, you are complete, in Christ you are complete and you are fully human, and at the same time you need to hold on to that and fully process that, and still, if you are choosing to remain in that because there's two callings in the Christian life. It's either celibacy or it's marriage. There's no either or, there's no in between. So for those who are called to remain in the single life, they need to do that again from a place of completeness and wholeness, not from a place of, I don't want to get rejected, or I'm scared of getting rejected.
Yeah.
And likewise, those who are called to the married life aren't to do that because, like, I couldn't ever manage living by myself or being on my own, or I'm scared to be on my own, sort of thing. So you need to hold both in tandem, don't you? Or reconcile both of those positions.
This is true. Okay, so we've talked about beauty to rescue in the context of relationships, but there's also beauty to rescue in other areas. Someone I like reading is a guy called Tim Keller. He writes a lot about God and about life, and he says that we shouldn't go to God because God is useful, but we should go to him because he's beautiful. And I think the first time I read that, I thought he'd written something wrong, but no, he said, we shouldn't go to God because he's useful, i.e. for what we can get out of him. We should go to him because he is beautiful, and the idea there, he's kind of like the center of everything that is good, that is wholesome, that is lovely. We're drawn to loveliness. We're drawn to beauty. So we should go to God because we see that in him. That should be what draws us. And I think part of the idea is if we go to God because we see his beauty, we're starting to go to God because of God's inherent worth, God's inherent value, which is way above our own sort of value. We're going to him because of him. We're loving him for him. Whereas if we go to God because of his usefulness, we're kind of doing it partly for sort of selfish reasons, like what can I get out of God?
There's a kind of something recently, I don't know if it was St. Ambrose or St. Gregory the Great, but he kind of summed it up this way. It's like, if we go to God because of fear of punishment, then we're slaves.
Wow.
If we go to God because of what we can get, then we're mercenaries. But if we go to God because we love God, then we are children.
Wow.
Which is a really, really nice idea. And it's like, we go to God because we love God, and we love God because he first loved us. And the idea of rescuing beauty, or beauty itself being something in need of rescue, is, I feel, kind of evident in the society that we live in nowadays. Is there is a lot of ugliness to society, and I think it doesn't take much to, and it's to make a Bishop Barron point. So he talks about the three kind of transcendentals being the true, the good, and the beautiful. And historically, people have tried to use that as an apologetic. So you kind of talk to people about the true, and then if you can talk to people what is true, then from that you know what is good and then what is beautiful. And because of the society that we live in, Bishop Barron says, perhaps like a more effective way is to flip that on its head. Because if you try to tell someone what's true, kind of like you get the hackles up. It's like, who are you to tell me what's true? You've got your truth, I've got my truth. It's like, okay, well, if you go into the good, so it's just like, same thing. Who are you to tell me what is good and what's right and what's wrong? It's like, but if you go on to the beautiful, or if you start with the beautiful, its beauty is its own apologetic. It doesn't need to be explained, it just needs to be beheld or beholden. I don't need to explain to you why the mountains are beautiful, why a lake is beautiful, or if live by the coast here in Gosport, when there's no night pollution and you can see the stars over the Isle of Wight. I don't need to explain to someone why that's beautiful. It just needs to be beheld observed. Yeah. And again, we see that in our architecture and historic churches. So like the older Catholic churches, the Orthodox churches, and the older Anglican churches, like they're absolutely stunning. People, atheist and secular alike, go to cathedrals to again just to take in some of that beauty. Again, your old medieval country church or your village church, it's very beautiful. There's stained glass windows. People, again, non-believers on their dog walks, or when they're out and walking, they might stop in to just simply go in and sit, because beauty is therapeutic.
Yeah, it's so true that the beauty is therapeutic. Like, one thing that's really caught my eye recently is I spend a lot of time in Aldershot, which is like a military town. There's quite a few kind of street homeless type people in that situation in Aldershot. Not a lot of Aldershot is beautiful, whereas 10 minutes across the border into Surrey, you've got Farnham, and they have a beautiful kind of I think it's like chalk-based see-through river running through it. Many of the shops in the town centre will have like kind of like thatched frontages with perfect white and black painted kind of cottagey type feel to it. There's kind of boxes of flowers dotted around the town centre. It's a beautiful place, but where we are in Aldershot, our church building happens to be quite fairly beautiful building, and then we've got a garden attached to it, and for quite a few years people have been really working on that garden. It's not a huge space, but they've been working to make it as beautiful as possible, and people from the town come there to sit there and to spend time there, to kind of soak in that environment. And some of those people who come there, men who've been kind of working hard days, and they're on their lunch break, they come, maybe sit down, have a cigarette and chill out. So some of the people who come there are kind of like young teenage boys, and it's been so interesting to me. Like I when I'm in and out of the church building, I'd sort of make a habit of chatting to people if they're in the garden, and they're always on some kind of spiritual journey, or they're there to chill, and they're a little bit more philosophical when they're there. Like one young man was talking to me about how important it is to be positive, and this, if you were to look at this guy, you'd sort of think, if I talk to him, he'll probably swear at me and tell me to do one. And but within that place of beauty, those people, they were doing something which was spiritual, and they appreciated the beauty of that garden and the peace which came with the beauty. And that's so fascinating to me. I wouldn't expect to have had some of those encounters there. What do we think is going on there? Like,
yeah, well, I mean, so someone, again, I think I've quoted him like 50 times in this recording so far, so I'll make it 51. But in Jordan Peterson's Beyond Order...
Jordan Peterson!
What does this mean? He talks about making one of the rules is make a room in your house as beautiful as possible.
Yes.
And then he talks about buying art, and art being a window into the transcendent. And it is fascinating because loads of people, or not loads of people, well, yeah, a lot of people experience God in beauty or in outside in creation. I think Bishop Barron, one of his most profound spiritual experiences was the stained glass window of Chartres Cathedral. So when people, or it might be they listen to a particular piece of classical music. So there's something about when they encounter something truly beautiful, in some aspects they are encountering God, or an aspect of God, or a characteristic of God in that moment. So I think, when people go out into the beautiful, what they're really searching for is God.
Yeah, in the end, it's God. Yeah.
And there's this brilliant line in Genesis 2, and it talks about where God makes all the fruit bearing trees. But it said what's interesting is how it's worded, and it's Genesis chapter 2. I don't know if it's verse 7 or verse 9. But it said God made the trees pleasing to the sight and good for food. So it's kind of like the pleasing to the sight was like the first thought, and like the idea of it being providing nourishment as assistance was the afterthought. That so like the primary thought was beauty.
Yeah, because man does not survive on bread alone, but from every word that comes from the mouth of God. Yeah, and God provides this to us. He provides that meaning. He provides that deeper level to life, which we all kind of need and seek. There's a writer who I used to read his stuff a little bit, a guy called Francis Schaeffer, and he was quite ahead of his time. Like he predicted things like the green movement that we have today, and I think he was writing about sort of 70 or so years ago. And he saw the connection between what happens when a society departs from God, and then the deterioration of art. It was really interesting. He basically sort of made the point: if we depart from like the most beautiful possible ideas, like the idea of God, who is all powerful, all beautiful, he is ultimate. He is the highest possible idea that any human could possibly conceive of. If we depart from that idea, it will also show within our art. And I was walking around London a couple of months back. I popped into one of these free art galleries. I thought it's free. I might as well see what's happening in here. And I got to the very last piece within the gallery. So I go into this dark room, and I am confronted with this kind of like small crane, like a robotic hand. If you imagine the robots that Iron Man works with in the Iron Man movies, it's kind of like that, this big craney thing with a sort of a claw on the end, or a hook, which was holding something. And it was holding this rope, this black rope was just dangling from it. And you go in and you look at it and you're like, okay, well, someone has made this, but what the hell is it? And it's like, to start with, you're like, well, is this actually art? What is this? I'm confused. Is this art, or has the building not been completed, and this is like a piece of machinery to finish the building? But lo and behold, it was art, and I read the little description of what this thing is supposed to be. Just I know we've talked about this before, Mike, but just from the description, what would you think that this is? What would it be to kind of represent?
Well, I mean, if I encountered in an art gallery a dark room, a crane holding a bit of rope, I would assume that some construction work is going on, and perhaps the builder has just gone for like a tea break or something.
Yeah, and perhaps he's like severed through the lights because it was dark in there. Yeah. And I don't know. Surely the point of art is to like see it. If anything. Anyway, I read the little plaque, and it said that this piece is supposed to represent the untamable feminine spirit. So like the rope is supposed to be there dangling from this crane. It's supposed to be kind of like eternally flowing, untamable and uncontrollable. and that was the whole point of it. But
It's just so bad.
it's so bad. But like partly it wasn't true, because the rope, even though it might have sort of looked like it was flowing, it was literally still. So it anyway. So you're there, and I mean, how much money has been put into this thing? It must have probably cost like at least in the region of $5,000 just for the material, and then I don't know how much they paid the artist. But the point I want to make is, like, you leave this scene, or I leave it at least, and nothing about that has been beautiful. I leave with a sense of frustration and exasperation that there was an opportunity for something beautiful to happen in there, and I've just got completely shortchanged. Like there was an opportunity where I could encounter something which was light and would lift me, but instead I've created something which is dark and just quite angry.
Yeah, and the idea of beauty being its own apologetic is, and saying, like, I don't have to explain to you why starry night or a sunset, these
inherently
things
beautiful.
These things are inherently beautiful,
Yeah.
Or a good piece of poetry or classical music. It's like these things like explain themselves. I don't have to tell you why the beautiful brunette babe walking down the road looks beautiful, because she just needs to be beheld. Like, look, she's attractive. You have to have a really hard go at while trying to sell that a crane holding a bit of rope in a dark room is beautiful. It's so obviously not. And there's always this stark contrast. I don't know if you've been to, or if our listeners have been to, Salisbury Cathedral recently. Now, Salisbury Cathedral is like an immensely beautiful building.
I have been there.
It's got a copy of Magna Carta there, so if you haven't been there, go there. It's got like an absolutely stunning baptismal font, and it's like self-filling, and it's like, can't actually describe it. You just need to
self-filling. Wow, that's intriguing.
It is. It does need to be seen. Again, the stained glass windows are unreal. The architecture, phenomenal. And yet outside of it, there's always some modern abstract monstrosity. Like when I went there a few years ago, there was some odd botched alien mermaid white creature thing. Recently, there's like basically what looks like a chicken coop, which is meant to be some sort of eco house made from MDF. It's just like, it's like, again, talking about in regards to pursuing a beauteous and pursuing a wife, about beauty demanding more of you because there's a cost of rejection. True beautiful art demands more of you, demands, skill, craftsmanship, hours of dedication and discipline. Defecating in a box and calling that art doesn't require anything of you. Getting a crane into a room, turning the lights off and putting a rope for it to hold doesn't require anything of you. Yeah. There's no skill there. There's no sacrifice there. So these things, objectively aren't as valuable.
No. Right, I think I'll move on from the crane. Yeah.
Well, I mean, I'm happy to segue to that into giving the church a good kick in. I mean, we are billed out the shoe height nonetheless. But
we love the church.
Yeah, we do love the church, but that's where the frustration comes in, because I feel rather than listening to what the Holy Spirit is saying during the times, like for a lot of Christian history, we've just gone with the spirit of the times, and I think a lot of that ugliness has crept into Christianity. Our buildings aren't as beautiful as they used to be. We used to have these liturgies, these homilies, which are profoundly beautiful. Even I'm incredibly biased here, but I would say the language of the King James is objectively more beautiful than the language of the NIV, even though there's obviously a comprehension struggle which people might, object. But
I'd probably agree with you, Mike, even though I don't love the KJV as much as you. I agree with you.
Agree with you, Mac. Yeah.
It's only KJV.
That's a good song, that. But yeah, no, I feel we've been sucked in a bit here. So I think, again, if you go to, somewhere like these great cathedrals, or these beautiful small churches, they are, as John Peter would say, a window into the transcendent. They do inspire some sort of awe within you, whereas kind of your stripped school hall with, you know, a blank pulpit at the front. There's nothing kind of awe-inspiring about that. It's why like the sermons need to be phenomenal, because nothing else about that environment is communicating the divine. And, you know, people may have their various theological quibbles with the idea of icons and statues and so on, but I think in a lot of ways we certainly throughout the Protestant world, throughout the baby with the bathwater and the, you know, with the cathedrals getting sacked and the icons getting smashed and, you know, statues getting smashed and so on and so forth. You know, even if you are of the theological disposition that those things are, you know, heretical or whatever, the blank, you know, stereotyping here, either church hall or United Reformed tin shack, which you sometimes see, corrugated iron shack.
Yeah.
You know, there's nothing about that which is like awe-inspiring.
No.
So I think we do need to re-beautify our buildings. Again, if you look at the Old Testament, just the first time the Holy Spirit comes upon someone is for the crafters, the building of the temple. That's the first reference to the, you know, again, if the law of first mention in the Bible means anything, is like the first time, again, the Holy Spirit is someone is anointed and filled with the Spirit in that way, is for, you know, it's an artist decorating the temple. And again, the temple is this elaborately beautiful building.
Yes. Yeah. This is true. Yeah, the spirit coming to give people those talents to make something beautiful, to help others to meet God. And I think creativity, like to get to beauty, you need that creativity, and creativity, it's a gift from God. God is inherently creative, and he can infuse us with that creative spirit. It's maybe something which makes us uniquely human. Like, not many animals would you describe them as creative. I have seen an elephant paint a picture before.
Was it good?
For an elephant, yes. And I think the elephant was incentivized by peanuts, the elephant had to be trained by humans. But yeah, humans, we are inherently creative, and we do seek out beauty, whereas other animals not in the same way. But I say that, I'm going to pause myself there, because actually there is a certain fish which I've seen on some sort of David Attenborough documentary, and the way that they mate is the male has to build a little sort of pyramid out of stones, and it has to be a certain way, and I think it becomes the nest of the female. And the female sort of comes along and inspects it, and she chooses the male, not necessarily the biggest male or the most beautiful male, but she chooses the male with the best pile of stones, pyramid. So, and I guess birds, when birds are mating, the males are the beautiful ones.
Well, exactly. Yeah.
Anyway, I don't know.
It's not a nature documentary, but
no,
these animal references have been fascinating. I did particularly enjoy the wasp one. To be fair, that was profound. But yeah, so the idea of Christians reclaiming beauty or making, again, their church buildings beautiful. It's like one of the things that I've noticed recently. So former church, they've got a massive £3 million building is in Alton.
Yes.
As old malting centre. It's called the Malting Still. Again, epic space, really amazing, really functional, can do so much with it. Could be such a powerful use of the kingdom. And like the current church I attend is fascinating, because there's a split between like the old church, because it burnt down 20 years ago, and then they rebuilt it, and then like the new church. And you've got this contrast between the kind of like what the ages of gone by have produced and then what modern times have produced. And you'd say about the modern space is like, again, it's an amazing space, great stage, you could do lots with it, you know, acoustics are great, and you know, all this stuff is really good, really functional, useful space, but it's not beautiful. Whereas the old space is profoundly beautiful. Again, we've still got stained glass windows, we've still got us. epic eagle lectern. We've still got an altar. There's still, again, this formerly Catholic church, and then a Anglo-Catholic church, and now an evangelical Anglican church. But there's still like a statue. There's still an icon. There's still like, again, these profoundly beautiful objects. They're still there, and there's just the contrast.
Okay. So what I think we've been finding in everything we've touched on is in order to make something beautiful, time has to go into it, sacrifice has to go into it. How much time? Well, an impractical amount of time, and you only put more time than is necessary into something if you find it to be beautiful, if you find it to be transcendental, if there's something of your worship goes into that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Like why do people spend so much time talking about football? Why do people cram their knowledge with football facts and figures? Like it's because they're worshipping, like through connecting to football, they're becoming part of something bigger. And yeah, we need more beauty in church buildings and in the Christian life, because God is beautiful, and it's worth meditating on God, spending time like marinating in that, and when we do that, when we pursue that beauty and rescue it, it's also good for us, because suddenly the light in our eyes starts to come back on, and something deep within is occurring.
Yeah, 100%. And one of the things that we were reflecting on earlier is just the simple, like, tidy your room.
Tidy your room.
But notice that when I was in my old house, funny thing is, I actually really liked the house a lot more when it was clean.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah, I cleaned the house. I top to bottom, done the washing up, and then I would sit down and have a drink or a meal or watch a film in my now clean house.
Yeah,
and it's like, actually,
yeah,
this house is okay. It's right. And then all of a sudden, that contentment's come, that gratitude has come, because I've just brought a little bit of chaos back into order and beautified the place that I was living in.
So through cleaning the house, you have cleaned yourself.
Exactly.
In a sense. Amazing.
Exactly. This is profound.
This is profound. Just think, something to kind of end on. If we ever kind of find ourselves in a completely kind of ugly space, a completely ugly situation, where there's no beauty in our lives, like we're perhaps stuck in the middle of Aldershot, as it were, then the good news of God is that Jesus, he can make us beautiful. Like he himself is you could say he's like the pinnacle of all beauty. Although he is in human weakness and in human frailty, he was completely pure as a person. He never kind of acted out of malice or anything. Like anger never got the better of him in a bad way. He was never kind of bitter in this life, and he chose to actually marry the church. He chose to marry the believers, whoever he would follow him. And actually, if we think that Jesus is the groom, Jesus is the husband, then that makes us, the church, into the wife. And in comparison to Jesus, we're really ugly. But then the way that God works, part of the grace of God, is even though we're ugly, Jesus chooses to come and love us anyway. He chooses to kind of take away our sins and helps us to get rid of all that wrong spiritual uncleanness which is on us, and then he replaces that by putting us into that beautiful white sort of bridal dress. Like the Bible says, although our sins are scarlet, like deep red, Jesus will make them as white as snow. And he starts to kind of inject not only forgiveness, not only redemption into our lives. He doesn't only provide for us, but he also makes us to be beautiful like he is. So if we're ever in a hopeless situation, then Jesus can actually inject hope into us. Yeah. Amazing. Any last words?
No, I think you. It was a good place to end. Yeah, no further words from me.
Okay. Well, this has been beautiful. I've enjoyed it.
It's been good discussion.
Yeah, this has been the Build Out the Shoe Hype podcast. I've been Jamie.
I've been Mike.
And that's the end of that one.
See you next time.